You are listening to the Happiest Lives podcast with Jill Lillard, episode number 72.
Welcome to the Happiest Lives podcast, where you'll learn to think better, feel better, and become the woman God says you already are. Here's your host, Jill Lillard.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Happiest Lives podcast. And we are going to continue the series on defensiveness. Last week, I introduced this topic to you, and I shared a personal story of becoming defensive with my family. And I promised you that I was going to go back, talk to my family, interview them, get their perspective of what happened, and kind of report back to you what I learned. And so I'm going to do that here in just a little bit. But the topic that we are going to talk about today is assuming the best. The alternative is to assume the worst. And when we're assuming the worst, we're not going to be able to have a conversation. We're not going to be able to deepen understanding. We might just be left feeling that we were right in the situation. And we're just going to hold on to the hurt. That really is not serving us. We're not really going to be good listeners or have a teachable spirit so that we can gain something from potentially the misunderstanding. So as I went back and interviewed my family, each one of them individually, about what they had thought happened in the shuttle ride, leaving vacation, going to the airport, I intentionally went in assuming the best. I discovered some things that I really had not heard. So I had told you last week that I did become emotionally flooded, thinking I was being attacked, ganged upon, criticized. And I honestly could not even recall what it was that they were saying that made me feel that way. I just remember the emotion that I had and the beliefs that I was holding about them. As each one of them shared their story privately with me, they explained that they had made some counter opinions to the opinion that I had stated. And so, for example, when I was saying that there weren't quiet spaces, which I had forgotten that I had said that, they had suggested some places that were actually quiet at the resort that I might have enjoyed. And I remembered that I was resisting their suggestions because they didn't really seem like the types of areas that I was trying to pinpoint. And so I think I was feeling a little dismissed in my opinion, and they felt like they were all making suggestions and I was dismissing their suggestions or arguing with their suggestions, which makes sense because if I was feeling dismissed, then I'm probably going to dismiss the suggestions that they're making. I think overall, when I made that comment and then when it seemed like I was becoming argumentative, that they thought I was just being negative. They thought I was complaining that the vacation wasn't good enough for me, which was far from the case. I guess in hindsight, I maybe regret even asking the question of what they liked and what they didn't like, because maybe it tended to just invite some negativity rather than just really basking in, sitting in the good time that we had all shared together, because I certainly did enjoy the trip and really don't have any regrets. I wasn't leaving with a negative taste in my mind about the trip, but maybe it felt that way to them. It was also interesting to me that my son, the part that was highlighted from him really wasn't even that beginning part. It was when he saw how I was reacting to everybody's suggestions that he said, "This is what I don't like when people get negative." Now, when he said this, I became super defensive. And I think I reacted by saying something, "The reason I'm acting this way is because of you," which he took offense at. He immediately felt like I was blaming him and turning the whole conversation on him, which baffled me, confused me. And I think it's at that point where I kind of just shut down and thought, hey, this doesn't feel good. So it's interesting to me that the highlight of that whole conversation is that he felt like I was blaming him and attacking him. When he made a comment that implied that I was being negative, I could have just owned that. I could have understood that, you know what, you're right. I am getting defensive right now. I'm getting a little aggravated because I'm feeling attacked. And I don't know if that's what you guys are doing or not, but let's just maybe take a time out right now. Now, I'm not exactly sure how that would have went over, if people then would have said, we're not criticizing you. I'm not exactly sure. In the moment, I think the best thing to do was to just take a little break and come back and revisit as we were. And I'm glad that we were able to revisit the conversation. Now, it sounds, the way I'm going to conclude this, it'll sound like the conversation was just all positive sentiments, good feelings, that I walked away feeling heard and understood. I don't know if that's exactly the case, but that was not my goal of having these conversations. My main goal was to understand their perspective so I could gain and learn from that. And I was really trying to set aside my own defensiveness and my own sense of superiority, even of what had happened, that I was right and they were wrong, and gain an understanding of their perspective, which I feel like I did do. But the way it concluded was my daughter-in-law had said something to my daughter that, I wonder if your mom just is on edge anticipating criticism because nobody really expresses the appreciation to her that maybe she deserves or that she needs to hear. I don't know if that's exactly how she said it, but my daughter did bring that point up. So after I interviewed each one of them individually, I brought everyone together. My husband had been feeling a little sick, and so I did not interview him individually, but we just kind of included him on the group discussion. Everyone kind of shared, hey, this is what we thought happened. What did you think happened? And so my daughter did bring up the point that Olivia had made a comment to her about that. And so then my son said, how about we each say 5 things that we appreciate about mom? Okay, so as I said, that was a really nice ending. I would like to say that I walked away just feeling really good about the conversation. And really, the more I sat with it, I did feel good about the conversation. I felt good that I opened myself up to talk and that we all sat around together and talked about the situation. And I feel like that was a very sweet gesture, really on behalf of my daughter-in-law saying that comment to my daughter bringing that up, that, hey, you know what? I wonder if this is true, that mom sometimes doesn't feel appreciated. And then my son instigating everybody going around and saying 5 positive things about me. It sounds very Pollyanna-ish and beautiful and perfect and like a big bow at the end. Although I did not completely walk away the conversation with that feeling. I didn't walk away thinking, oh, they understand how they were being, but I should have, because as I'm telling it, I feel like they were taking a little bit of ownership there. And I feel like I was taking some ownership. But I see that all the time, even in couples therapy, where I feel like something really positive, really good happens, and the person doesn't feel completely good about it. Maybe there's some hesitancy in receiving the goodness of that. But when we can pause and reflect on that and see the win in the conversation, then we can really glean and benefit from that. So those are my takeaways from my conversation with my family after I allowed myself to look at the situation where I felt defensive and put some space and time and a pause in between there, and then went back to my family to have a conversation to deepen understanding. So today, as we talk about assuming the best, I was jotting some notes to myself about what that means. And I think assuming the best is assuming the best about the other person. It's assuming the best about yourself and assuming the best about God in the situation, right? Because at the end of the day, I think it goes back to, where is God in all of this? And maybe that sounds a little big in light of the situation I was talking about, but there are bigger situations where you might feel attacked and criticized, and you feel like no one has your back. You don't know if God even has your back there. The fact that these other people have free will to say the things that they're saying. So the best I can assume about another person is that I am no better than they are. I can assume that they fall short just like me, because nobody is perfect. And I can assume that there is no ill intent. There is just human selfishness, maybe lack of awareness. We're all just doing our best and trying our best, and some days we do better than others. If I'm going to assume the best in someone else, I want to see their positive intent. And I don't want to see myself as superior, better than. And I want to be able to see them and myself through the eyes of grace. I wouldn't feel defensive if I wasn't feeling critical toward myself, right? So if someone says a statement that I felt like was critical, if I didn't on some level believe that critical comment, then I wouldn't probably feel defensive. When I look at things through the eyes of grace, I want to be able to have grace for myself, grace for them, because of the grace that God has for all of us. I want to be able to see that, hey, I do those things too. What is the alternative to seeing the best in someone else? Well, the alternative is to see the worst, to see ill intent, to see myself as better than, to believe that I would never do such a thing. I would never say such a thing, because that simply is not true. We're all capable of doing things that are unkind, unloving, even if that is not what we meant to do. So our best is not that anyone is perfect, but we are all people in need of grace. People do things because they have thoughts and feelings, period. And they're allowed to think and feel whatever they want, just like I am. Now, the things that they are thinking and feeling and doing may not serve them, and they may not serve other people's. They may not serve the cause of love. They may not honor the Lord. And yet they have free will to think, feel, and do what they want the same way that I do. So I can assume that the other person is not trying to be difficult. They're not trying to be a jerk. They may not know what they're doing. I could assume they don't know how they're coming across. They don't know what they're saying. They don't know what they're doing right now. I can also assume that their thoughts and feelings are not my concern, meaning that I don't have to define myself based on what they are thinking and feeling. Who I am is defined by God. And that can be the definition of my identity. And when I'm willing to see myself through the eyes of the Lord, I can also see that I am a person who does have shortcomings and may not always understand even how I come across. When I'm assuming the best in others, I can also assume that they might be right. They could be right in terms of what they are thinking, and they might also be wrong. The worst case scenario is they are right and I'm wrong. Do I want to be able to learn and grow from that? The best case scenario is that they're wrong, but can I be okay with them being wrong about me? And so I like to think we are both right and we are both wrong. I can also assume that no matter what, I'm going to be okay because my identity, my value, my worth is secure. So the alternative to all these good assumptions are bad assumptions. And so the alternative to thinking that they may not know what they do would be to think, you know what, they're a terrible person and they know what they're doing. Another thought that may not serve me is to think, you know what, I'm superior. I'm right. They're wrong. That is a thought that also does not serve me. There's no upside to it. Also, when I'm thinking that they shouldn't think or act or feel the way that they do, then I am just deluding myself. I'm fighting with reality because they have free will and they should think, feel, and do whatever it is that they're doing because that is what they're doing. And who am I to take away something that God has given them, this power of free will, the right to choose, the right to think, the right to feel, right? The same way that I get to paint the canvas of my life, that I get to view things the way that I view them, they get that same privilege and right. The other alternative is to think that I am wrong and that makes me a bad person. And so if I am assuming the worst, then I'm going to assume that I am defective somehow, that I have failed somehow. I could also think that I need to set them straight, that they can't have those thoughts about me and I have to defend and protect myself. And I have to protect my identity and my worth because it's all on the line. So if I am assuming the worst, I'm going to show up in a way that is defensive, that is not open to learn and grow. However, when I assume the best, I'm going to expect that others are capable of learning and growing as well. And I can even go back after a fight, after a disagreement, after a regrettable incident, and try to repair things by recognizing that my defenses were up and then intentionally putting them down, opening myself up to assume the best about them and try again. So that concludes our lesson for today about assuming the best. And next week, we're going to talk about owning your actions. If you struggle with defensiveness, one thing that you can do is own how you're showing up and take responsibility for yourself instead of focusing on what the other person is doing wrong. I'll talk to you all again soon. Until then, have a beautiful week. If you enjoyed this podcast, I would love to help you take this concept and apply it. Join me in Clarity and Courage, my cost-effective coaching program for Christian women. Each month, receive the tools you need to apply the concepts and grow. We will meet on a live coaching call where you can ask me anything. Plus, you get access to the worksheet workshop where you can have conversations with other women just like you. Learn more and sign up at myhappyvault.com/Clarity and Courage.